I started to transform the bank into future-facing institutions, to be proactive, to be fast and adaptive, and to be at the frontier of the development. And just last month, we launched a new brand identity and logo, and we focus on science and technology and innovation as a game changer and as a driver for economic growth and development. Our brand identity focus on empowering the peoples and the nation to build their sustainable future through innovation, Islamic finance, partnership, and value chain. And this is why also in February we launched an Engage. It is online platform ecosystem that connect inventors with entrepreneurs, investors, and provide them a space to engage and connect and to discuss ideas, imaginative ideas, that to address the solutions to the development problem and challenges facing our member countries as well as the world as a whole, especially in 6 areas of SDGs: food security, education, health, water, and so on. We all understand that people living in developing world need more than just grant funding. They need sustainable solutions to help them build their own prosperity with the right tools and supportive environment. Innovators and businesses can the great potential of science, technology, and innovation. In fact, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We all know that, and we all aware that many nations, the lack of financial and natural resources, but through science and technology and innovation, we see how they move from one state to the state. Now they are classified as on the top of the industrial nations. So the IDB group believes that science and technology are offering more solutions than ever before, and by investing in these key areas, countries can give their people the tools to build a sustainable future. STI is an important at the IDB that is at the heart of our visual identity. We are also delighted to be joined by 2 leading figures in the innovative lead development sector, who I will hear from later, Dr. Phil and Mr. Alex, today both experts in their field of helping take innovative ideas to market. Alex is on the board of Pitch at Place, a global initiative launched by British royal family as well as Sir Tim Berners-Lee's Web Foundation, which actively campaigns for digital equality worldwide. He is going to speak to us about the benefit of creating a global ecosystem. Dr. Phil also is currently the CEO and founder of Leverage Science and organization, helping investors and inventors identify big ideas and turn them into reality. Prior to setting up Leverage Science, he served as Deputy Director in Discovery and Translational Science at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. His workshop this afternoon will focus on sensitioning innovators to the thinking process of impact investors. I know that this Kazakhstan and surrounding region have so much to offer with regard to the development of innovation and entrepreneurs. And I hope this event today will highlight the wealth of talent and ideas that exist. I wish everyone pitching today the best of luck, and to all of you proactive and informative today. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I now would like to invite Mr. Yerkan Sadikov, the acting chairman of the Committee of Science at the Ministry of Education and Science for Kazakhstan. Please welcome.
On behalf of the Ministry of Education and Science, let me welcome all the participants of today's event, and let me thank the Astana International Financial Center and Islamic Development Bank for organizing this event and for supporting the scientists. And I think that this is the first event that can become a good tradition. Last year, as you may know, in Almaty in September, there was the first summit of the country members of Islamic Organization, Cooperation Organization Department of Science, and a good amount of documents was signed, including the declaration describing 12 priorities. And one of the priorities is about support for scientists, co-financing, fundraising, and finding the ways to commercialize the scientific ideas and projects, to turn them into reality when they are able to meet certain demands of people. And today, Kazakhstan is cooperating with our scientists who have partners in many countries that are members of the Islamic Organization for Cooperation. And also, we see co-financing from Kazakhstan for Tunisia, Algeria, Pakistan, Malaysia, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyz Republic. Almost all the scientific areas are presented: biology, math, physics, and such areas as construction, manufacturing. And being the Ministry of Science, we try to support such projects, and we support them, including grant support that is provided to them. And one of the prerequisites for participation of our scientists in grant financing is their cooperation, international cooperation, including the one with the partners from the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. And I know that active participation in organizing this event was extended by the scientists from Nazarbayev University, Eurasian National University, and about 100 projects were submitted from various regions of Kazakhstan. And I would like to wish that our scientists who participate in the projects of Islamic Development Bank to succeed in cooperation with such an excellent development institution, and muster not only the ability to compete, but also cooperate with the other scientists. And if Islamic Development Bank thinks that it is possible, maybe within such competitions we can really promote cooperation like this one. During the last year's summit, many countries have offered their resources, including the resources for implementation of the projects of scientists in other countries. Once again, I would like to congratulate you on having this event, and I wish all the pitchers, all the participants of the competition, even more success.
Sadikov. The world is developing faster than ever before, with science and technology offering innovative solutions to major economic and social health challenges. Our next speaker will discuss the importance of real financial support in the science and technology sectors to drive inclusive and sustainable development, and will highlight the Islamic Development Bank's flagship STI initiatives, the Engage platform and the Transform Fund, which promote and fund innovative projects throughout the Islamic world, helping accelerate progress towards the global goals. I would like to invite our next speaker, who will deliver the first masterclass talk of the afternoon, Dr. Hayat Sindi, Senior Advisor to the President of the Islamic Development Bank, Science, Technology and Innovation. Please welcome.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين. Your Excellency, Mr. Sadikov, the Acting Chair of the Science Committee of the Ministry of Education and Science of Kazakhstan, Mr. Hani Sumbul, the CEO of ITFC, distinguished guests, my great innovators, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Actually, it's my great honor and my great pleasure to be here second time in Astana. As His Excellency mentioned, last year in September, we just launched the idea of establishing a fund for science, technology, and innovation to empower every single scientist to address our challenges. And we hear back this year with establish the fund. We have now great minds to be able to go through their ideas. I'm so thrilled, I'm so happy that things like that is really coming true. Can I have the presentation, please? Great. As His Excellency mentioned, the Islamic Development Bank is a multilateral bank. We're not a commercial bank. We believe that every single human being should live in dignity and prosperity. We serve 1.6 billion people, 57 countries. We provide technical and financial help to be able to build their own infrastructure. And really, we want to really empower people for sustainable future, driving innovation, partnerships, Islamic finance, and the whole value chain of the empowerment. And to do that, there is so many ways to do that. And one of the things that we wanted to really empower, how really we can connect the scientists and engineer and the whole ecosystem of innovation in such a secure and connective platform. So we did this year launch at the Bloomberg headquarters in London, a really unique platform, digital platform. And this is the first digital platform connect the developing world, the Islamic world, in the whole ecosystem of innovation. So entrepreneurs like you, investor, government leader, NGOs, all they can connect in very secure platform. And we address certain challenges. I'll come back to the challenges. And what is really the main function of the Engage platform is mainly three objectives. The first one, we really wanted to have matchmaking. Because if you go to the net or internet and search who are really the great minds, and who are really the NGOs that are really investing in technology, and who are really the private sector doing that in the developing world, you won't find really conclusive data. And that's why I want to have this platform so we can have our matching peers. So if you are a technologist and you're a scientist, you want to find who are really can really empower your idea, or he can really, or she can add to your technology, so you can use this platform. And also if there is a match between an investor and inventor. So matchmaking is really important. And the second thing for this platform is transfer of technology. As His Excellency mentioned, we cannot invent the wheel all the time. And we face huge challenges in all aspects of life. So some ideas are really amazing ideas, maybe in Côte d'Ivoire can be transferred to Senegal or somewhere in Malaysia, as we did the Islamic Development Bank, transfer the technology for the rice grain from Malaysia to Suriname, and now we are empowering the whole farmers in Suriname by grow a grain of rice that can good enough to be used for the marketing. And the third thing about this platform is call for innovation. As I mentioned, we're really looking for ideas. We are looking for solutions, for practical science to address our challenges in the area of food security, in the area of quality of education, in the area of water, energy, infrastructure, and health. So the call for innovation, and I mentioned to His Excellency, we need to fund it. And money is part of the equation, is a crucial part of the equation. So we're so pleased that His Excellency adopted the idea, and when the whole board of the Islamic Development Bank agreed, and they put straight away 100 million. So Transfer Fund is the fund that we are here, is a $500 million fund, and mainly this fund to empower any scientist in the world. It doesn't have to be coming from a certain region or certain color or certain religion. Any scientist, any innovator, any great ideas who can address the challenges, but in one condition, the challenges only can apply to our member countries, because we have to look after our member countries and the money coming from our member countries. And also we raised another 100 million from ISDFD, the Solidarity Fund, so we already raised 200 million, and this is a great news. And so far, and this is like the number, we already have now 2,000 applications, which is amazing. We launched this year in February, and we have amazing ideas, and the deadline will be end of this month. So please, whoever here has an amazing idea, it doesn't matter where you come from, if you are a head of NGO, if you are a president of the country, if you are a student, if you have an amazing idea, please apply, because there's no restrictions. Anybody with a good idea, and any idea in any stage, we don't want to leave anybody behind. So within the Transform Fund, we really have 4 different support categories. Why? Because we don't want to leave anybody behind. Any idea is a good idea. So we fund in 4 categories: proof of the concept, if the idea in early stages, startup to scale up, and also in commercialization, which is very new to the bank and is very brave, and this is really the future, and capacity building. Let's talk about it more here in detail. So if anybody has an amazing idea and he wanted to have a little bit of cash to really to prove it, and he needs some time and he needs money to equip his lab, or he can get somebody, so we be able to fund, and this is an angel fund. We give up to $100,000. If somebody who's already started a company and you want to scaling up, and sometimes it's not easy to find second round investors and your stuff, we also will be here partnering with you for equity, and we give you up to $300,000. And if you have an amazing idea and want to commercialize it, take it from one to the highest level, and also we also can be partner with you, and we give you up to $1 million. And I just want to mention, we see up to 300, up to 1 million, because we also have another partners to help us. So maybe 1 million from us, and maybe some other cash from other investors. And also for capacity building, it is very close to His Excellency's heart. We need to really, invest in human capital. And anybody really has an idea to build the science, technology, innovation in any country from the member countries, they are welcome to apply. And also here is an angel fund. So that's why we left. We don't leave anybody's behind. So we have angel fund, hedge of the fund, fund of the fund, and VC fund to be able to empower the whole sector, all level of innovation. How it works, we are really a unique, I just wanted to say, transform fund, because it's a fund really governed and protected and also empower the innovators. It's very easy to apply. You just can take a, if you go to Engage platform, you can ask your name, your email, and just put your idea, and just submit. And we have a great way of screening through the innovation. And we have an amazing scientific advisory board and also board of trustee board. Let me talk first the board of trustee, chaired by His Excellency, and we have an amazing members who are come from the whole different sector, from different nationalities, and also Muslim and non-Muslim, because if you are really wanting to integrate innovation, you need to really open, and science is a universal language, so you need to really empower with the right talent everywhere in the world to be able to empower and give the right help for the deprived. So we have here the member of the board of trustee, and you have it in your also in your brochure. You can read more about them, but as I mentioned, we have a mixture between men and women, and also from different sectors of the different nationalities. And also the rest of the board, and we have amazing, people who are really understand what it takes to make a difference in a developing world. Because at the end of the day, the Islamic Development Bank is not really the main goal, is to have equity and the return of money. The real investment for us is the creative minds. Because the creative minds, if when you build them right, you can throw them anywhere and come back to you with the good things. So project can fail, project can succeed, and it's fine, and that's what we empower. But the main thing, how really we can empower the creative mind, which is the most needed in developing world. And here is the scientific board, and I said we have an amazing scientific board who go through the application, and we have 5 men, 5 women, so we are gender balanced, and all of them coming from the developing world, but they are very much recognized internationally. So they know, as I mentioned, what it takes, how to be in the frontier of science and an advanced nation of science, but at the same time, they understand how the developing world need to build it step by step. So not to be harsh on have the very tough standard. They have the right standard to make the impact. So we have them in all different areas, in health, in food security, in artificial intelligence, in indigenous knowledge, because that's a crucial as well to integrate with the local about their knowledge, how they're really benefiting the science arena. And we're so lucky, and you have about them there to be able to know more about them. And there, a bit introductory film about the...
From hunger to health, and education to energy. New ideas in science, technology, and innovation have the power to solve the world's problems. 800 million people suffer from malnutrition, whilst 1.9 billion adults are overweight. 263 million under 18s have no access to education. 864 million people lack access to clean drinking water. Only 19% of the world's energy is renewable. 4 billion people don't have access to the internet. New ideas could come from anywhere, from anyone, and if properly funded, can make a difference everywhere. The Islamic Development Bank is committed to translating new ideas into real-world solutions for society's most pressing problems. The Transform Fund provides the resources needed to empower innovators across the globe to fulfill their potential, offering grants of between $50,000 to $1 million across 4 application categories. From new ideas to patented technology ready to be commercialized, we have the power to transform the future together today. Applications for the first round of grants close on the 31st of July 2018. Visit www.isdb-engage.org and click on Transform in the menu tab.
So please, you have plenty of time until the end of this month to apply to the Transform Fund, and that's why we're here to make awareness and to be really meeting the talents, the innovators, and the creative minds, out-of-the-box ideas. Please apply, and then we will be in touch with you and to take you to the next stage. As I mentioned, you have here Engage, isdbengage.org, and then click at the menu at the Transform Fund and just apply. It's very easy. You can access from your mobile phone. You can even take a picture of your invention and send it, and we look at it. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the rest of the day, to meeting with the inventors and to be with my fellow judge panel. I'm really, really excited because this is really what I enjoy the most, meeting the creative minds who are really addressing challenges of people who are really deprived from many things. So our responsibility to be in touch with them, our responsibility to provide whatever we can take, an idea, fund, mentorship as a Transform Fund. It's just not just only giving you money, it giving you the whole package of mentorship as the whole for life, take you through the entrepreneur journey, providing you also with legal help. And great news to tell you, ISDB is really establishing and is already done intellectual property unit. And this is very unique for Multilateral Bank. Why? Because we wanted to empower you. Why? Because we want to protect you and also protect the investors, so we can really help you to patent your ideas free of charge. So we are really here dedicated to you to be able to empower you and to see your dream come true. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hayat, for the incredibly engaging talk. It now gives me pleasure to welcome Dr. Phil Randazzo, the founder and the CEO of Leverage Science, to deliver his seminar entitled Beginning with the End in Mind, Lessons in Moving from Idea to Impact. As we are about to hear, moving from idea to impact is not an easy journey. Dr. Phil Randazzo will discuss some of the important lessons in taking an innovative idea and turning it into impactful reality. 3 case studies in disruptive transformational technologies will be used to illustrate the concepts and lessons. Please welcome.
I don't have the clicker. Is this it? Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. This is my first time in Kazakhstan. In Astana. It's a beautiful place. I'm just incredibly impressed by the progress, and what I can see is a lot of innovative energy here in the city and in the country. I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me, and His Excellency Dr. Bandar and Dr. Hayat as well, for inviting me to this important and wonderful event. So my name is Phil Randazzo, and today I'd like to tell you about some of the lessons learned in innovation that I've learned over the past 3 decades. I spent 10 years in academia, and then 10 years in the biotech industry in California, and then the last over 12 years at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, funding innovation-type programs and managing those programs from beginning to end. And so these lessons involve the journey in taking an idea and transforming it into impact that positively affects people around the world, particularly people from the lower and middle income countries. And so I'd like to transmit some of those ideas and lessons in the context of the Islamic Development Bank Science, Technology, and Innovation Fund Transform framework. And this, as you heard earlier in the morning, is a new program. So what I'm going to do today is tell you about 3 disruptive and transformative programs that I funded as a way to discuss some of the important lessons in science and technology innovation along the way. And so these are 3 of my some of my babies that I'm going to tell you about, so I'm very proud of them. And so excuse my proud, as I feel like a parent to some of these programs. So let's get started. And they're examples in the SDG, in the Sustainable Development Goals in food security and in health. And so first, in regards to the ISDB's STI fund, it's focused on sustainability, science ideas, and projects with focus on innovations benefiting the Muslim world. And so the first part is really about linking the ideas to education, health, agriculture, water and sanitation, clean energy, and infrastructure. The second part is really about having those ideas and focusing those into, or looking at the problem set in those 6 different SDG areas and looking for disruptive, transformative, and inspiring ideas. But in order to take an idea that's inspiring and potentially transformative, one has to be able to then convert that into something that's adaptable, replicatable, scalable, readily diffusible, affordable, and accessible. And that's really where the meat of the issues are. And then if one can focus one's energy in those areas, one can get to something that's of high impact, a solution, and a solution that hopefully can support public good through the commercialization of the technology. And so here are just for you to see, there are actually 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which you can find on the web, on the UN website, and you can actually learn about what those impact goals are in the website. And that's a good place to go for an entrepreneur and an innovator that wants to know, how can I solve a particular problem that links to these goals? And those details are in the website. And so the SDG that are focus of the bank, as was mentioned before, are these 6 SDGs. And so again, when you go into the website, you can actually look at the indicators. So for example, for Zero Hunger, there's more details: end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. But within those, there are actually measurable impact areas that one can actually look at. And when you think about your innovation and promoting your innovation to an impact investor, one can then link how one's, specifically, quantitatively, how one's invention might answer one of these questions. For example, reducing the number of people that are in severe food insecurity, or reducing the prevalence of undernourishment. So I'm now going to give you examples of 3 disruptive and transformative programs. And the first one, we start with a problem statement. So 1/3 of all food grown in the world is lost to waste. And so there's an economic impact to that. Reducing food waste from 20 to 50% globally could actually save $120 billion to $300 billion a year US by 2030, which is when the next SDG finishes. This is important for both consumers and producers because they both suffer losses. So you all have experience with buying an apple at the store, or a banana, or some berries, and you get it home, and before you know it, it's spoiled. Or you go to the market and you see that the fruits have already started to spoil. And so this is a big problem. And so how might one address that problem? There's also another side, and there's an environmental side to this problem as well. And that is, if food is wasted after it's actually been produced and shipped, there's a lot of other environmental waste that goes along with it. So water waste for growing the food, land resource waste, where the food is grown, energy waste and fertilizers, fuel, refrigeration and transport. There's a big impact on the environment as well when food is wasted. So it's not just a hunger and nutrition problem, it's also an environmental problem. And so the question is, it's what all innovators ask themselves, what if? So what if there was a way to keep fruits and vegetables from spoiling so quickly? And what if nature already has an answer to this challenge? And so a chemical engineer in Santa Barbara, California, about 5 or 6 years ago, had an idea. And he was actually, Santa Barbara is surrounded by agricultural areas in Southern California. And he was driving through the agricultural areas, and he wanted to know why fruits and vegetables spoil, but they don't spoil instantly. So if you pick fruit from a tree or a plant, it doesn't rot immediately. It takes time. And so is there something in nature that controls that process? And if so, can you extract that from plants, those compounds from the actual plants that used to preserve the fruit over some period of time, and can you concentrate it and then put it back onto fruits when they've been picked, and can you then slow down the rotting process of fruit and vegetables? And so he had this crazy idea, and so all three ideas I'm going to tell you about are initially, when they were first posed, they were considered crazy ideas. And so for the innovators out there, it's okay if people tell you your idea is crazy. That's a good thing. So, and so he ended up getting a $100,000 grant to test his idea, just like Dr. Hayat had mentioned about startup money to test an idea. And he used that to start testing the idea in the lab and starting a company. And about 5 years later, with more work and more investment, we have the results of that idea. We'll see a video here showing that. On the left is without the coating of the natural compounds that come from food waste, and on the right is the Appeal product, which has coated the fruits or vegetables, and this is time-lapse. So this is the product that's been sprayed on the plants right after harvest is organic, it's organically certified, it's all natural, and it's something that can be applied on the farm. These are avocados, which are worth their weight in gold, at least in the US. These are $2 or $3 an avocado in the US. And they just launched 2 weeks ago their first commercial product for avocados in the US. And the plan is to take this technology around the world. And particularly to help smallholder farmers in Africa and in Asia. You can see with bananas. So I think you've all experienced this before at home. So this is a great invention. And so I think that's probably enough. And so this has a global market. It hits a number of SDGs, zero hunger, good health and well-being, clean water and sanitation, and industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Second problem. So dengue, Zika, and chikungunya are mosquito-borne diseases with severe human health impact, resulting in severe fever and sometimes death. So this is a disease that's not found more in the tropics and the subtropics, and actually even further north from the subtropics. For dengue, there are 50 to 100 million cases of dengue per year worldwide. It disrupts health systems, so when there's an epidemic in a big city, the hospitals are just flooded with people, and nobody gets taken care of because people are just flowing out of the hospitals. The health systems just shut down. So there's a secondary effect of these epidemics. It's not just the disease, but it's when you have 4 or 5 children in a bed in some of these countries, and then they're spreading other diseases as well to each other, and this is what happens, and these epidemics are just absolutely terrible, and they have economic impact as well, because when the systems break down and everyone's sick, it has impact on people being able to work and get around, etc. Zika is another one, which you may have heard about that epidemic over the last few years. It causes severe birth defects in babies, absolutely severe. And chikungunya is another one that you may not have heard of as much, but it's becoming more emerging in the world. And that not only has fever, but it has a crippling arthritis. And so people that have chikungunya infections will have a hard time walking and moving around for up to a year. I've seen people that have had that, and they can barely move their joints because it's a terrible disease. And so what if? Again, the innovator's question, what if? What if there was a way to mass vaccinate mosquito populations so that they could no longer transmit viruses such as dengue, Zika, and chikungunya? Now that's a crazy idea. What if in nature has already an answer to this challenge? And so in the second case, I'm going to tell you about a project that I started funding back in 2005, and it was based on an idea from some scientific observations in fruit flies. So I guess it relates back to the first project, which is about fruit. And so, fruit flies infected with a particular bacterium called Wolbachia actually don't get viral infections. And so this was an amazing observation that had been made years ago. And so what the scientists in Australia did, Scott O'Neill, is he observed that Aedes aegypti mosquitoes, which normally transmit dengue, don't have this infection. So he asked the question, what if we put this bacteria into Aedes aegypti mosquitoes? Would that in some way stop that virus and other viruses from growing in the mosquito? And so, and then what if we could then take those mosquitoes and release them into neighborhoods and let the infection spread, just like they do in Drosophila, so that all of those mosquitoes from that species carry that bacteria? Could we protect cities from epidemics? And so we're going to show 2 videos now. One short video, which is a speed draw video that shows you how the technology actually works. And then the second video is from a field trip I did with Bill Gates in Indonesia at a site where they were actually doing these releases. And Bill explains beautifully the people aspect of the technology transfer, because that's one of the things I'm going to talk about later in the lessons learned is science and technology is great, but the people part is the most important. And so how you then meld science and technology with people in programs is the most critical aspect for it to be successful and have impact. And so we'll get to those lessons later, but let's go to these 2 videos so you can understand the technology a little bit more and the context and where it's being tested and used.
The mosquito known as Aedes aegypti originated in Africa. Over the last 400 years, it has spread throughout all tropical regions of the world, transmitting viruses to people. We are working on a way to stop this mosquito from transmitting dengue. Our method uses naturally occurring bacteria called Wolbachia that live inside insect cells and are passed from one generation to the next through the insect's eggs. Wolbachia are found naturally in up to 60% of all the different species of insects. Insects that include fruit flies, moths, dragonflies, and butterflies. The secret to the success of Wolbachia is how it manipulates the reproduction of the insects it lives in, so to give itself an advantage. It works like this. If a male insect has Wolbachia and mates with a female that doesn't, then the eggs she lays won't hatch. If the female has Wolbachia and the male doesn't, she would lay her normal number of eggs. They would all hatch, and all offspring will carry Wolbachia. When 2 insects that both carry Wolbachia mate, the eggs will hatch, and all offspring will carry Wolbachia. Over a few generations, the number of individuals carrying Wolbachia increases rapidly until nearly all the insects within a population have the bacteria. We wanted to see if we could use Wolbachia as a way to stop dengue transmission. To do this, we first had to move Wolbachia into the mosquito so that it would grow and be passed between generations. Using microscopic needles, we took Wolbachia from the fruit fly and injected it directly into young Aedes aegypti eggs. It took us thousands and thousands of attempts, but finally we were successful. We then took the mosquitoes that contained Wolbachia and infected them with dengue and found something really exciting. The virus didn't grow well in the mosquito, and if it can't grow, it can't be passed between people. Our next step was to build large enclosed outdoor cages in northern Australia that we filled with local mosquitoes. We then introduced mosquitoes containing Wolbachia to see if it could spread into the cage population, and it did. We now wanted to test the method where dengue is found, but before we did this, we needed the government to examine the safety of our method and approve our trials. Then we needed to gain the support and approval of communities to release mosquitoes containing Wolbachia. With these approvals, we began our first open field trials in Australia in 2011. Wolbachia mosquitoes were released once a week for 10 weeks, and within a few months, close to 100% of the mosquitoes had Wolbachia. And years later, they still do. Ongoing trials in Australia and dengue-endemic countries are now determining the best way to deploy Wolbachia across whole cities. It is our hope that with continued success, the Wolbachia control method will protect the health of the 2.5 billion people that live in dengue transmission areas.
Dengue is actually one of the few diseases in the world that's getting worse all the time. Although some people are working on vaccines or drugs, we have none. The Dengue Project is a kind of amazing thing where they're putting a bacteria called a Wolbachia into these mosquitoes that prevents them from transmitting this terrible disease. If you release the mosquitoes that have this bacteria and then they mate with the other Aedes aegypti mosquitoes, it spreads this Wolbachia that blocks the disease. Yeah, in a way it sounds pretty simple. So you'd think, okay, we just grow a bunch of mosquitoes, we go out and release them. Well, in fact, getting the community to be comfortable with the idea that you're actually putting mosquitoes into the environment, you know, what does that mean? It is a natural bacteria that's being used, but even so, they reach out to the community and talk to them. If things go well in these small pilot areas, then in 2016, they'll take this whole city here, which is about 400,000 people, and do that for a couple of years. And if that goes well, then they'll take a really big city like Rio de Janeiro, Jakarta, Ho Chi Minh City, all cities that have growing dengue burdens, and go and do something really large scale where the health benefits would be big. You know, all these things we work on require a lot of patience and a lot of learning. This is one that, you know, I think it's at least halfway there and has a very high chance of success.
Thank you. So I lost my screen here. I can keep going now. So, they discovered serendipitously, they first started to go after just dengue, but they found out in the lab that this intervention also works for Zika and chikungunya. And so the data so far looks very good. There's large-scale trials going on in Jakarta, which should be finished next year. Also, the entire city of Medellin, Colombia, 2.5 million people, is being done. They're doing it in Vietnam, in some of the islands in the Pacific, are also beginning to start the program. And also Rio de Janeiro has already begun releases in one of its suburbs, Niterói. So by the end of next year, there should be clear efficacy data where one can then get WHO sort of certification and then ready for global rollout. But one of the things that's really important here is that they've already seen data in Australia where in 2 of the major cities where dengue used to spread when people would bring in the infections after visiting Bali, there hasn't been any local transmission of dengue in Australia in these areas since this program started. And so we think it's going to work. And so it's, so that's another sort of example of disruptive innovation, taking what was a completely crazy idea when it started into something that's close to being a real product that's going to help a lot of people all over the world. The third problem I want to talk about is vitamin A deficiency. And so throughout Uganda, vitamin A deficiency in children is a leading preventable cause of blindness, and it also increases the risk of death from common infectious diseases. And in Uganda, bananas are a staple crop, but are deficient in vitamin A. And so people in Uganda, if you've ever been to Uganda, they eat bananas for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And in fact, it's thought that the average consumption of bananas in Uganda is over 500 grams per person per day. And so that's a lot of calories in bulk with very little vitamin A. And so, and the other thing that's been discovered is actually vitamin A deficiency has been getting worse in Uganda over the years. The fortification programs and the vitamin supplementation programs have failed to deliver to the poor all over Uganda. And so something still needed to be done. And so another scientist, actually another Australian scientist, asked, what if the local staple crop, cooking bananas, had high levels of vitamin A? And what if poor smallholder farmers could grow these high vitamin A bananas themselves? What if they could grow their own vitamins? Since they eat bananas all the time, they sell their bananas to the markets, etc. It's a big part of their economy. And so here's another example of a program that's focused in Uganda, Rwanda, and India, mostly Uganda. So can we see the video?
Some of the conservative numbers are around about 600,000 to 700,000 children every year die of vitamin A deficiency. Around about another 300,000 kids apparently go blind permanently blind because of vitamin A deficiency. Well, in Uganda, bananas are their staple food, and it's part of their culture. The word for food in Uganda is matoke. The word for bananas in Uganda is matoke. So food and bananas are synonymous. The big challenge was that when we started, we didn't know which were the genes that we needed to use and how we should control them. This had never been done in banana fruit before, and very little was even known about how you go about increasing provitamin A in fruit. We were well aware that there were bananas with very high levels of provitamin A. There's a collection in North Queensland where they're grown, and so we were able to get material from there, and we pulled out a banana gene out of there that's been very successful. So what we did is we then took what we know as somatic embryos, little embryogenic cell suspensions, and we put the genes into these cells, and each one of those we regenerated from a single cell back to a whole plant. It's a long process. It takes about 12 months. And then we multiplied those plants up once we got, and then we took them up in tissue culture up to South Johnson. That's where we do our field trials. And then we take those through to fruiting. We do all the analysis that is at KUT, both the fruit and the molecular analysis. We've already taken those genes over to Uganda, and our collaborators in Uganda have put them into the local bananas. They're going extremely well. A very important part of the project is that the experimentation done in Uganda is done by Ugandans, not by us. We transfer the technology. I go over there 4 to 5 times a year. Very importantly, 3 of the scientists working on this project have done their PhDs here at QUT, and they've gone back and they're now working actively in the project. They're leading the project from a lab perspective. We know exactly what causes vitamin A deficiency. We know exactly how to solve it. The Gates Foundation has backed us since 2005, and they've been absolutely fabulous. To me, I think to really go into the field in Uganda and see those orange bananas growing and thinking, wow, we're involved in this. Hopefully, in some time in the future, we'll see the impact that the level of vitamin A deficiency, particularly in the rural areas, is really starting to drop. I mean, that would be just a fabulous thing to be involved in.
So this project really the important part of this project, and I'll get back to this later, is that this technology was transferred very early on to the Ugandans, and all of this work was done for the Ugandan bananas in Uganda. The Ugandan scientists own the program. They're the spokespeople for the program. It's their product, and it's their program. And so this sort of balance in the way the technology is transferred to country programs and the scientists in those countries is a really important part of the acceptance of and actually figuring out how to distribute and make the technology actually work and how you can make it attractive and have demand from the people. And so that all comes from the Ugandan group. Not only they did the science, but they've been doing all of the rest in terms of the market work on this. And so we hope that within 2 or 3 years this will be a product that's approved by the government for distribution to farmers. And so here's 3 transformational programs that began with the end in mind. And so what lessons can we learn from these programs? And so these are all disruptive, transformative, and inspiring, which is what the fund is looking for. And so what are some of the lessons that we can learn? So the general nature of the problem is similar for all of these programs. They focused on a big problem, a big development goal problem. They were very specific about how they were going to attack that problem. So for the Appeal Technologies product, they weren't going after all of food waste. So they weren't looking at grain food waste or anything else. They were being very specific, and they focused first just on the avocado, because the avocado they're like gold. There are $2 or $3 in avocado, and so that was a high market, important commodity that spoils very quickly. And so they were specific and they stayed focused. And they met a critical unmet need. So I think does everyone see the need for themselves for sort of having their fruits and vegetables have this type of product on it? I would assume that everyone this resonates with everyone that's ever purchased food and had that spoilage problem. And so we know there's a demand for a new solution as well. And so these are some of the characteristics. And then the general, and we can see this for the other programs as well. The general nature of the solution is thinking about how to make it low cost from the very beginning. You have to keep thinking about cost. You can't think about cost after you create something really expensive that can't then be made cheaply. You have to be thinking of cost from the very beginning of the program. You have to be thinking about delivery from very early in the program too. How are you going to get this delivered in a way that has traction? And And so, for example, for the Appeal product, they worked with producers on the farm to work out the technology to make sure it would work right. And so with the Wolbachia program, with the mosquito program, they actually went into communities, and they actually worked with those communities, and those communities actually helped them with the program, and I'll get to that in a moment, but they were thinking about delivery early on. No behavior change for a new product is the best thing, so if you don't need to spend 90% of your revenue marketing what you have, but people understand it, and they want it, and they don't actually have to change the way they do things, that's the best kind of product. And so these products are done in a way where the consumer, if I go to the store and buy an avocado that has Appeal on it, I don't need to do anything different. So I don't need to change my behavior. I don't need to, for the mosquito program, the cities where they usually do, when there are dengue epidemics, they would spray insecticides, which really don't work, but they try doing that anyway. They can still do that if they want. So if there's a constituency in the city that's pro spraying of insecticide, it doesn't harm this technology at all. So nobody has to change the way they do anything. For the bananas, once the farmers take the cutting and grow them, they're growing their own vitamin A, and they don't really need to do anything else as well. So these are sort of easy to deliver, no behavior change required, and then either sustaining or self-sustaining. So for this is a very sustainable business model because there's a real economic pull for this, the first one. For the second one, you do releases over an 8 or 10 week period. Once a week, you release these small buckets of mosquitoes in the neighborhoods, and then you're done. It's self-sustaining. And so that drives down the cost because the cost of deployment is amortized over 30, 40 years with just 10 weeks of releases. So very, very cost effective. Cost effective just like a vaccine. It's like an environmental vaccine. And then for the banana project, again, as long as people are comfortable eating orange bananas, we're not trying to replace the other bananas, but supplementing, as long as they're comfortable with that, and they're doing taste testing and things like, they'll be doing taste testing to make sure that it still has the same local characteristics, then behavior doesn't need to change as well. And that could end up being a status symbol as well, eventually. Who knows? And so I'm going to go a little bit more in the lessons on adaptable, replicatable, scalable, readily diffusible, affordable, and accessible. So adaptable, it really asks the question, is the product compatible with existing systems? Replicatable, can the results be replicated elsewhere more than once? So for the banana program, they're doing trials not only in Uganda, but Malawi. For the Wolbachia program, the mosquito program, they're doing trials all over the world on both hemispheres to make sure that they can adapt the technology for local conditions and make sure that it can work under different environments and in different cultural systems as well. Is it scalable? So this is something that all of these groups had to think about. How do you produce enough mosquitoes in a certain amount of time? And so they worked on that as part of the program early on to make sure they had a way to do that. The Appeal product, again, they worked on, given the scientist that started as a kind of chemical engineer, he knew a lot about production, and so they made sure that what they could do could actually be scaled and not just pilot batches, but large commercial batches. But they thought about that early on as well. It wasn't sort of an afterthought. Thinking about all these criteria at the very beginning of the project can save you a lot of time and money because you will be then focusing on what needs to be done early on so you don't have to go back and fix something later on. Readily diffusible, so how difficult will it be for adoption elsewhere? Accessible, will the product be available across local areas and broader geographies? Thinking about that early on. Is it affordable? Is it in a cost range that allows for most people to pay without causing harmful trade-offs? And so, for example, in the US healthcare system, now there are these crazy new drugs that cost a fortune. And that's not something that's sustainable. And that, you know, people then have to make this harmful trade-off between getting a drug and not having any money. And so inventing with that cost in mind so that large groups of the underserved can be served is really important to think about early on, and how you can adapt, evolve, and think about from the very beginning how one is going to do that so that you can have the maximum impact. There's a couple of other things that I think are really important, and that is acceptable. And so I'll talk about this a little bit in the next slide, but is the product culturally and socially acceptable? And so that was one of the things that the mosquito program had to do, is they had to go and talk to the communities and work with the communities to make sure they understood the technology and that they felt comfortable with the technology. And the community actually helped them think on how to make a better product. The other thing that helps make a program socially and culturally acceptable is that there are local people that are actually running the program. And so if there are people from, if it was people from Australia doing the releases in Indonesia, that wouldn't work. It's an Indonesian program based at the University of Gadjah Mada. And so these are, and actually the funder in Indonesia is an Indonesian family that's actually funding the trial in Indonesia. So it's a very local thing, and that's important for acceptance. And then is it desirable? And so is the product something people want such that they're willing to pay for it? There's a lot of products and technologies that are developed that people just don't want. And a scientist might say, well, of course, it makes perfect logical sense that if you use this technology, you will solve their problem. But if people don't want it for some reason, it's not going to have any impact. And so thinking about the social cultural aspects from the very beginning and being embedded in communities with your potential customers and stakeholders early on is critical for coming up with ways of communicating the technology during the R&D process, but also it helps you in the commercialization at the end. I can give you an example. In Yogyakarta, Indonesia, they did releases in certain communities in the city, and the people in communities that hadn't had releases yet heard about it, and they were demanding. I was actually at a community group, and they were saying, when are we going to get the mosquitoes? We want our mosquitoes now. We don't want to wait 6 months. And they were actually sending their children to daycare in the community that already had the Wolbachia deployed because they wanted to protect their children during the day. And the other anecdote is the real estate prices went up in the areas where the Wolbachia had already been released. And so again, is the product desirable? And once they invested the time and the effort in getting the communities engaged, they got permission to do the work, and once they were able to show that it worked to the community, the word spread. And so investing that time in communities early on is really important because they were able to get their messages right, they were able to get community participation, and in fact, in Australia, in the city of Townsville, where they did releases about 3 or 4 years ago, they actually had school children releasing the mosquitoes for them. And so it was part of the school program. So they incorporated into the science program in the schools sort of some of the biology behind this. And then the kids got these little kits, and they got to release mosquitoes themselves. And they got to be sort of citizen scientists. And so these are some ways to get actual public involvement in new technologies and public uptake and acceptance. And so these are important lessons to learn and to think about early on. And so I think I've kind of gone through these with these programs already. And so the last thing I want to talk about is and I've started to allude to this already, is success is really grounded in ethical, social, and cultural principles when one wants to be working in the developing world. And the two main aspects of this is building trust with the communities, with your stakeholders, and reducing risk. Because if you build trust, you reduce risk. And so this is something that I worked on for about 13 years almost 13 years at the foundation with a bioethicist partner. And we call it an ethical, social, and cultural approach. And we've broken it down into a 4-step approach that demonstrates respect to stakeholders. And we found this is really important for technology uptake, for especially innovative technologies, in how one takes this type of approach can be really important for getting uptake and maximal impact. But also actually improve one's product as well, because your customers, your stakeholders can actually be your partners to help you actually improve the technology. And so the first thing is listening to stakeholder voices. The second is understanding, especially when you're working in different parts of the world, understanding people's values, beliefs, and interests. That's really important. So it's not enough just to listen to someone. You actually have to understand where they're coming from. And so, and that resonates. And that resonated with the communities where they were distributing the mosquitoes in different parts of the world. Recognizing the imbalances, and this is the trick. Particularly with scientists have an idea that I have the solution, and there's a real scientific logic to that, but there's a people part of that too that doesn't necessarily go into the logic. And and some of that is about the imbalances. And so sometimes the scientists can have sort of a high status, and then the people in the communities may not have the same status. And so there's a power differential. And so recognizing that imbalance with the people that you're going to work with becomes really important, because if you can reconcile that through a set of principles and how you're going to work with them, you equalize and have a real trusting and relationship with the communities that you're going to work with your customer base. Because when there's an imbalance, it's hard to have a good relationship when there's an imbalance in your relationship. We all know that from our own personal relationships. And so that's the same between scientists and the stakeholders that they work with. And this is one of the important things that's really missing in science these days. And this is where a lot of technologies run into problems in acceptance, is because there's this differential. And so the really important thing for scientists is try to recognize that imbalance and try to even it out, so that you work with those that you're trying to help, and not giving them something, but make them part of the solution. And so making when one wants to have the most impact, making your customers or making your stakeholders part of the solution is the most powerful thing that you can do in science. And so I'll give you a few examples. Am I running over time, or 5 minutes? Okay, just to sort of wrap up. So for the Appeal product, I mentioned they partnered with the producers. They were very transparent and clear about their intentions, and so that becomes really important. I think when science and technology works with the public, being transparent and being clear is really important. Sometimes that's hard for scientists and technologists and innovators to do, and so it's always good to collaborate with communications experts to help you with that. Intention and character. For this company, their focus isn't just on rich world markets. They're already working in the developing world. They're working on cassava, helping cassava farmers, et cetera. And so actually that brings good feelings, will bring good feelings from the customers in the rich world, that this is something that can help everyone. And they actually empower their customers too. So if you think about it, you're providing customers with a means of contributing to helping the environment, but while still providing value to those customers. And so here's another example of how you can really sort of plug into people's desires, their cultural desires of being good stewards of the environment. I think I mentioned this already with the community engagement that was done with the mosquito program. The other important thing is it's locally led. So the technology is transferred early on to a program in a country, which then owns the program. They run it. The Australian group just sits in the background and gives them technical advice. but the country programs, they lead the pace, they run the whole thing, and they can adapt the technology, how they do it, how they do the delivery in a way that's appropriate for their own biologic context, but their own unique social and cultural context. And so being flexible and allowing adaptation within different cultural environments for all the different stakeholders are trying to serve becomes really important, not one-size-fits-all model. And then with the Ugandan program, one of the principles that they did was James Dale, the Australian scientist, partnered with the Ugandan scientists from the very start of the program, and he treated them with such incredible respect. I mean, he made them equals from the start, and that doesn't always happen when there are sort of north-south or south-south partnerships, but he made it an equal partnership from the beginning. And he gave them what they needed, but they're the ones, he let them do it themselves and he let them shine and be successful. And again, that was an important part, that's going to be an important part of this being accepted in Uganda, because this is considered a Ugandan product. It's not an Australian product. And so having a partnership that's in balance, that's an equal partnership, becomes really important when scientists and technologists and innovators want to partner with other groups, is think about how you can make it a real, true, co-equal partnership and not you know, one person's the boss and the other person kind of does what the boss wants them to do. And so in the end, I think I'll stop here, but just to say that always think about impact at the end. And the characteristics of these three scientists that ran this, they always had, how am I going to have the most impact from the start? And that was always the driving force. And that was always their driving motivation, is how can I do the most good? And they were unique in this and really driving this from the very beginning. And they were selfless in that respect. It was all about the impact. And that's really important if you want to have impact, is you got to think about impact every single day that you're doing your program from the very beginning. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Phil, for such an insightful seminar. We would like to invite His Excellency, the speakers, and the expert judging panel to the front of the stage to take a group photo. Please. I also would like to announce that we're going to have a short coffee break, and I would like to request you to come back before 12 o'clock, since we're going to give a start to the first round of the pictures. Thank you. Once more, we're going to have a short coffee break, and I would like to request to come back before 12 o'clock. One more point to mention, should you need any help